Welcome to our channel book podcast. Expand your mind and transform your life.
All right, let's dive deep into this The One Thing by Gary Keller. We're dissecting a YouTube summary someone sent in. It's all about cutting through the noise, getting to those actionable insights to really crush your goals, but not about doing it all, right? More like finding that one thing, that focal point to propel yourself forward.
Yeah. The one thing really turns a lot of that typical success advice on its head. Like it straight up says, the idea that everything's equally important, well, that's a trap.
Whoa, so it's saying focus on just one thing? That's, kind of goes against everything we're told these days, right? Like multitask, do it all, be everywhere at once.
Exactly. It's like when you spread your energy too thin, you're not really effective anywhere.
Hmm.
Think about like an orchestra. If every single musician is trying to play the loudest, most complex part all at the same time, what would you get? Chaos.
Yeah,
Right?
be a mess.
But when each instrument gets its moment, you get that harmony, a beautiful composition.
Okay, I'm with you. Great analogy. But if we're only focusing on one thing, how do we even choose? It feels kind of like overwhelming to narrow it down that much. The summary mentioned going small, which feels counterintuitive, right? We're talking about big goals.
Yeah, that's the thing. Going small, it's a mindset shift. Instead of getting bogged down by all the things you could do, it's about zeroing in on what you should do. Keller's saying, real success, it's built on a sequence of small wins, each one kind of like builds momentum like dominoes.
So it's about finding the first domino, the one that sets off the chain reaction for the rest of our goals.
That's it. And the 80-20 principle can help you find it.
The Pareto principle.
Right. 80% of your results come from just 20% of your efforts. Find that crucial 20%.
So it's all about pinpointing that 20%. Then within that, finding our one thing, the one with the most impact. It's like going small and 80-20 work together. We're not just blindly doing stuff, we're prioritizing.
You got it. And the summary also tackles this whole multitasking myth. Keller says multitasking, it's not even a human skill. It's a term invented for computers.
Oh, tell me about it. I fall into that trap all the time. But if we're not supposed to multitask, how do we manage it all? The demands, the constant information, it's a lot.
Habits. That's the key. You can't just rely on willpower all the time. It runs out. The one thing is about building the right habits, making things automatic so you free up mental space for what really matters.
So it's like you're setting up systems that support your goals, so willpower isn't the only thing pushing you forward. That makes sense. It's more sustainable. And I remember the summary mentioning it takes like 66 days on average for an action to actually become a habit.
That's the magic number. It's about consistency, doing it over and over again. Imagine trying to cut back on sugar. Instead of resisting every dessert you see, what if every morning you pack a healthy snack?
Okay, I see where you're going with this.
Eventually, you just naturally reach for the good stuff. It becomes automatic.
That makes a lot of sense. But we've talked about willpower being so important for building these habits, but it's limited, right? So how do we make sure we're not using it all up before we even get to our one thing?
Good question. The one thing talks about recognizing when your willpower is low. They had this study, people had memorized long numbers. Afterward, they were way more likely to pick unhealthy snacks.
Interesting. So our brains get tired.
Right. Cognitive overload, it drains your willpower.
It's like after a crazy day at work. You're mentally spent, easier to just order takeout, binge watch TV, forget the healthy dinner and that run you planned.
Exactly. So the one thing suggests tackling your most important task when your willpower is highest. For a lot of people, that's first thing in the morning.
So it's strategic, like you're mapping out your day based on your willpower reserves.
I'm starting to see how all this connects. But what about work-life balance? Where does that fit in with the one thing? Well, Keller kind of flips the script on work-life balance. Says striving for perfect balance, it's an illusion. Life's more about counterbalancing different areas. Kind of like, think of a ballerina spinning on her toes. Looks balanced, but really she's constantly making tiny adjustments.
So instead of trying to keep everything perfectly equal all the time, it's more about acknowledging that sometimes one area needs more attention, and that's okay.
Exactly. It's about recognizing the ebb and flow of life. Work might be intense for a while, then family stuff takes over. You counterbalance within each area, not trying to make them equal all the time.
That's a huge relief, honestly. Takes the pressure off trying to achieve this perfect balance that probably doesn't even exist.
Right. And it makes space for those big goals, the one thing. encourages us to have.
Oh, yeah. The summary really emphasized thinking big. It was like a pep talk, like, don't limit yourself, dream big, even if it feels impossible.
Absolutely. The one thing is all about setting ambitious goals.
Hmm.
Think about like Copernicus and Galileo, right? They challenged the entire view of the universe.
And because they were willing to think big, they revolutionized how we see the cosmos. It's incredible. So if we're thinking big, how do we translate that into action?
The focus question. That's your tool. It helps you channel your energy, make progress toward those goals. The question is, what's the one thing I can do such that by doing it, everything else will be easier or unnecessary?
Whoa, that's a powerful question. It makes you think big picture and granular all at once. It's like a laser focus on what truly matters. But asking a question is one thing. Turning it into an actual habit, a routine, that feels like a whole other challenge.
You're right. It's not just about asking once. It's about making it a daily ritual and breaking down those big goals into smaller chunks, annual goals, monthly, weekly, even daily.
So we're creating a system, a roadmap to guide us step by step toward our one thing. It's all starting to come together now. But we've been focusing on the external stuff, goals, productivity. What about the internal? Finding our purpose. The summary mentioned that too.
Absolutely. It even suggested a really cool twist on that focus question. Ask yourself, what's the one thing I can do in my life that would mean the most to me and the world, such that by doing it, everything else would be easier or unnecessary?
That adds a whole new dimension. Now, it's not just about personal achievement, it's about purpose, about making a contribution to the world. That's pretty profound. But honestly, for a lot of people, figuring out their purpose can be really daunting.
You're right, it's a journey. It takes self-discovery.
Yeah.
The one thing suggests reflecting on what excites you, what you're naturally drawn to, what you want to be remembered for.
So it's about listening to that inner compass, those things that make you feel truly alive. It's about connecting with what matters most to you, not just chasing some external definition of success. I love that.
And once you start to get a sense of your purpose, then it's about, finding the time to actually dedicate to your one thing. And that's where time blocking comes in.
Oh, yeah, time blocking. I've heard about that. Sounds amazing, but also kind of scary. My days are usually just a whirlwind of reacting to whatever comes up.
It's about being proactive, not reactive. Time blocking puts you in control of your day, not the other way around. The one thing suggests scheduling time off first, then block out a big chunk each day, ideally 4 hours, for focused work on your one thing.
4 hours, that's a big commitment. It feels almost counterintuitive. Shouldn't we be trying to fit as much as possible into our day?
That's the old way of thinking. The one thing says by dedicating a big chunk of time to your most important task, you're actually more productive in the long run. You're giving yourself space to really focus, cut out the distractions.
So it's about creating a sanctuary for your most important work. But I bet it takes a lot of discipline to actually stick to that time block, right?
It does. That's why the one thing offers some really practical advice. Find a quiet space, shut off distractions, and learn to say no to requests that encroach on your time. You've got to set boundaries.
So it's about creating a culture of focus, both internally and externally. But let's be real, things come up. Deadlines change, emergencies happen, life throws curveballs. How do we keep that focus when our schedule inevitably gets disrupted?
That's a great question, and one we'll definitely explore, but let's take a quick pause and we'll come right back to it.
Okay, so right before the break, we were in the middle of talking about time blocking and how to protect that time for our one thing. But things happen, right? How do we deal with those unexpected disruptions? Because they always seem to come up.
Yeah, that's where being adaptable comes in. The one thing isn't about being rigid. It's more about, having a plan, but being flexible. Like, remember that ballerina analogy?
Yeah, the constant micro adjustment.
Right. It's about making those adjustments to stay balanced.
So when something unexpected happens, we don't just scrap the whole plan. We figure out how to work our one thing into the new schedule.
Exactly. Sometimes it might mean your time block is shorter, or you move it to another part of the day, or, hey, sometimes you got to accept that your one thing has to wait until tomorrow. The point is, don't let those little disruptions completely derail you.
Makes sense. It's about persistence. We're committed to our one thing, even when life throws curveballs. Though sometimes those curveballs feel more like, I don't know, obstacles, like success thieves, the things that sabotage our progress and just drain our energy.
Oh yeah, Keller talks about 4 major success thieves in The One Thing. The first one, it's that inability to say no. We feel obligated to say yes to everything, even if it means like sacrificing the time and energy we should be putting towards our one thing.
I am so guilty of that. It's like my automatic response is yes, even when I know I'm already stretched too thin. But it's hard to say no, especially when you want to be helpful.
It is tough. But in the one thing, Keller reminds us that saying no to things that don't align with our goals, well, that's how we actually say yes to what really matters.
Okay, yeah. So it's about setting boundaries, putting our one thing first, even if it means maybe disappointing someone or feeling like we're letting people down.
It's about recognizing that you can't make everyone happy all the time. It's okay. And when you say no to things that don't serve your goals, you can actually show up better for the things that do.
That's a good way to look at it. It's not being selfish, it's being strategic. Okay, so that's the first success thief. What's the next one we got to watch out for?
Okay, this one's a bit sneakier. It's chaos. All those unexpected things, the constant information overload, the feeling of always being on.
Chaos is like a constant companion these days. It's easy to get overwhelmed by all the things demanding our attention, notifications, emails, it never stops.
And the one thing, it actually encourages us to, well, not fight the chaos.
Why, Ollie?
It says manage it.
So accept that it's going to be there and figure out how to navigate it. Kind of like surfing, you can't control the waves, but you can learn to ride them.
You got it. Instead of getting wiped out by every wave of chaos, we learn to kind of anticipate them, ride them out, maybe even use them to our advantage.
I like that chaos surfing. So how do we become chaos masters instead of getting totally overwhelmed?
Well, one way is to create systems and routines that kind of help us stay grounded even when things are crazy, like maybe a solid morning routine, using a task management app, or even just having set times for checking emails and social media.
So we're building in these pockets of order within the chaos. Those routines and rituals help us stay centered, focus on what matters.
Exactly. And we can also be proactive about minimizing the unnecessary chaos. Unsubscribe from those email lists you never read. Turn off notifications that are just distracting. Delegate tasks when you can.
So it's about taking control of what we can control in our environment. Eliminate those sources of chaos that are within our reach. Okay, chaos, we're on to you. What about success, number 3?
This one is an unsupportive environment. It could be anything, really. A cluttered workspace, negative people, anything that drains your energy.
Oh, those energy vampires, they're the worst.
Yeah.
They can really suck the motivation right out of you. But it's not always easy to just cut people out, especially if they're coworkers or family.
You're right. Sometimes it's not about eliminating those people completely. It's more about being mindful of how much time and energy we're giving to those relationships.
So setting boundaries, protecting our own well-being. Like if someone is constantly bringing you down, maybe it's time to limit how much you interact or even have an honest conversation about how their behavior is affecting you.
Right. And when it comes to your physical space, the one thing talks about creating a workspace that actually supports your goals. Could be decluttering your desk, adding some plants, maybe some inspiring artwork, finding a quiet place where you can really focus.
So it's about having a space that feels good, energizing, a space that reflects the things you value. Okay, 3 down. Who's the final success thief we need to be on guard for?
This one we often do to ourselves. It's neglecting our health.
Oh, that's a big one. It's so easy to let our health slip when we're busy, chasing goals and juggling everything. But I know when I'm not taking care of myself, my energy, my focus, everything suffers.
It's true. And the one thing reminds us that our health, both physical and mental, it's the foundation for everything else. You can't pour from an empty cup.
So it's not selfish to prioritize our health. It's essential for achieving our goals and just, living a good life.
Exactly. And taking care of yourself doesn't have to be this big, complicated thing. Getting enough sleep, eating healthy food, moving your body.
Yeah, even small changes can make a difference. I know for me, just getting a 30-minute walk in at lunch can totally change my energy for the whole afternoon.
There you go. And beyond those basic things, the one thing also encourages us to pay attention to our stress levels and build in some self-care. Meditation, journaling, spending time in nature, or just taking a few minutes to relax.
So it's about being kind to ourselves, right? Recognizing that we can't be productive or effective if we're running on empty. Okay, so we've got our 4 success thieves and some strategies to combat them. But what about the internal game, the mindset? What do we need to cultivate to really achieve mastery in our one thing?
That's where we get into this idea of embracing failure. The one thing reminds us that failure isn't the opposite of success. It's a step toward success.
It's like that saying, I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work.
Exactly. The one thing is all about shifting our perspective on failure, See it as feedback, information that helps us learn and grow.
It's that growth mindset, right? Believing that our abilities can be developed. It's not about being fixed. It's about effort and practice and being willing to learn from mistakes.
You got it. And remembering that success, it's not this straight line. There are going to be twists and turns, ups and downs, unexpected detours along the way.
Like hiking a mountain, you've got uphill climbs, switchbacks, maybe you trip a few times. But the important thing is to keep going, even when the path ahead feels uncertain.
And speaking of keeping going, the one thing also talks about the importance of rest.
Oh, yes. It's easy to feel like we need to be on all the time, like rest is a weakness or something. But I know when I'm burned out, I'm definitely not at my best.
The one thing reminds us that rest is not the enemy of productivity. It's essential for staying productive and creative over the long term. It's about honoring our natural rhythms, recognizing that we need time to recharge.
So we've got to give ourselves permission to unplug, step away from all the doing and achieving, and just be. Whether that's a vacation, time with loved ones, hobbies, even just taking a few minutes to meditate or read.
Exactly. And when we prioritize rest, we often come back to our work with more energy, more focus, more creative ideas.
It's like hitting the reset button. You come back to your one thing refreshed, ready to go. And, speaking of purpose, we've talked a lot about achieving goals. But at the end of the day, it's about aligning those goals with our deeper values and aspirations.
That's it. The one thing isn't just about external success. It's about living a life that feels meaningful, fulfilling. It's about aligning our actions with our values, making a contribution to the world.
Yeah, the summary even shared a quote from that book, The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying. It said that so many people, at the end of their lives, their biggest regret is not having the courage to live a life true to themselves, not the life others expected of them.
That's a powerful message. Life is short. We've got a limited amount of time to chase our dreams and make a difference.
So it's about having the courage to be ourselves, to go after those dreams that light us up and live authentically.
And the one thing, it gives us a way to do that. Identify your one thing, focus your energy, build those supportive habits, balance your priorities.
Yeah, it's all connected.
You can create a life that's both successful and fulfilling. A life that you can look back on and feel proud of.
This has been such an amazing journey through the one thing. I feel like I'm already seeing things differently. But before we wrap up, let's take a minute to summarize everything we've learned. Okay, so I've talked about a lot, like those success myths we all hear and how to really harness the power of our one thing. Before we sign off, let's hit those key takeaways from the one thing, maybe some advice for our listeners.
Definitely. I think one of the biggest things we learned is how important it is to shift our thinking. Instead of trying to do everything, it's about figuring out what truly matters. The 80-20 principle, that was really eye-opening.
Yeah, it totally changes your perspective. Like, not every task is equal. We find that 20% that drives most of our results.
Yeah.
Then within that, we find our one thing, the one that's going to make the biggest splash. It's about strategy, not just adding more to our to-do list.
And once we've got our one thing, we got to protect the time and energy to work on it. Time blocking, that was a game changer.
Time blocking blew my mind. I mean, dedicating that much time, like a solid 4 hours each day to your one thing, it makes you prioritize. You create space for that deep work. It's like you're giving yourself permission to focus on what truly matters.
It's about more than just blocking the time, though. It's about protecting it. We got to watch out for those success thieves that sneak in and steal our focus.
Oh man, those 4 success thieves, Keller nailed it. Saying no, dealing with chaos, making sure our environment's supportive, and not forgetting to take care of ourselves. It's like he gave us the cheat sheet for figuring out what holds us back, Annie, how to overcome it.
Right. The summary gave us some great tactics for dealing with each one. Saying no gracefully but firmly, building those systems and routines to manage the chaos, being mindful of who we spend time with, and making our health a priority. All that sets us up for success.
Like we're building this fortress of focus, but even when we've got the best strategies, we're going to face setbacks. Things happen. So how do we keep going, even when it gets tough?
Well, the one thing really drove home was embracing failure. It's part of the journey. It's not about avoiding failure. It's about seeing it differently. Like setbacks, they're opportunities to learn and grow. They don't mean we're not good enough or that we should quit.
It's about that growth mindset, right?
Mm-hmm.
We can develop our abilities. It's not about some fixed limit. It's about the effort we put in, practicing, being willing to learn from our mistakes.
Exactly. And remembering, success isn't this perfectly straight line. There's going to be ups and downs, twists and turns, detours you never saw coming.
It's like hiking up a mountain. You've got the steep parts, the switchbacks, maybe you trip on a route, but you keep going. You keep moving forward, even when the trail ahead gets a little blurry.
And speaking of keeping going, sometimes that means knowing when to rest. We can't run on empty all the time. The one thing made that really clear.
It's so true. It's easy to think we have to be on 2004/7, that rest is for the weak or something. But when I'm burned out, I know I'm not doing my best work.
Rest isn't the opposite of productivity. It's actually essential for staying productive and creative. It's about working with our natural rhythms, knowing that we need time to recharge.
Yeah, so we give ourselves permission to unplug, step away from all the doing, all the achieving, and just be. Maybe it's a vacation, spending time with people you love, hobbies, or even just taking a few minutes to meditate or read a book.
Right. And when we prioritize rest, we usually come back to our work feeling more energized, more focused, ready to be creative.
It's like hitting the reset button. You come back to your one thing with fresh eyes and renewed purpose. And that brings us back to purpose. We've talked about achieving goals, but it's really about aligning those goals with what matters to us deep down.
The one thing. It's not just about some external marker of success. It's about living a life that has meaning, that feels fulfilling. And that means aligning our actions with our values, contributing something to the world around us.
And there was that powerful quote in the summary from the book The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying. So many people, when they're at the end of their lives, their biggest regret is not having the courage to live a life that was true to them, not the life everyone else expected.
That's something to really think about, you know? Life is precious. We only have so much time to pursue our dreams and make a difference.
So it comes down to having the courage to be ourselves, to chase those things that light us up and live authentically.
And the one thing, it gives us a roadmap for doing just that. You figure out your one thing, focus your energy, build those habits that support you, balance your priorities.
Yeah.
You can create a life that's both successful and fulfilling. Life you can be proud of.
This deep dive into the one thing, it's been amazing. I feel like I've got a whole new perspective.
Me too. We talked about the power of focus, building those habits, how to overcome the things that get in our way, and the right mindset to achieve mastery in whatever we choose.
So much good stuff. We hope this has been helpful for everyone listening. You know, figuring out your one thing, achieving it.
Remember, success doesn't just happen. It takes effort, consistent action, and the commitment to live a life that's truly your own.
So go make it happen. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.